Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. Today, a think tank report says the cost of decarbonising farms will cut their average income by a fifth, and 1 in 20 will end up in the red.
If they were forced to bear these costs, as we fear that they would, then those income falls would be big. Net zero cost being put on farmers would cut incomes by a fifth. So it's less about the cost being big and more about who bears them.
We'll have more on that a little later. First today, all week we're finding out more about new entrants to farming. Many things add up to making it difficult to get a toehold on the farming ladder, not least the availability and cost of buying land. But some people are determined to overcome those challenges against the odds. Nancy Nicholson has been to meet a young couple who realised their dream by leaving behind their city lives in York and moving hundreds of miles to the Western Isles.
Come on, sheep! Come on, sheep! So this is a croft at 13 and 14 Garranin. It's about 5 hectares in size. We got the croft back in October, so we've just been starting to move animals onto it, and we're renovating the croft house as well.
Currently have ducks, chickens and sheep.
I'm with Luke and Helena Crossland-Thompson, and it's a crisp, very cold winter's day. A great day to see the croft, gorgeous. Actually. So we're standing, looking right on to the full length of the croft, and it goes a long way up into the hill there, but it's absolutely covered in rushes and ruins. Yes. So you have your work cut out, guys.
We do, yeah. So the croft itself, we're quite lucky in that it has been used, so it's not completely overgrown, but there are a lot of rushes, and we have some very nice old dry stone pens and other structures, but they are in need of a bit of TLC, and the ditches need some work as well.
You are brand new crofters, really.
Yes.
You have come from the mainland, from city life in
York. Yeah.
So why did you come so far?
We've been planning a move like this for several years, so going
we've
into it.
Looked at land in Yorkshire, Wales. We basically needed something the right size and the right price point.
The price was the biggest one, and also just finding readily advertised small acreages was really difficult. A lot of it goes on the informal trade, and we didn't have the connections.
Reading into the crofting system, it was sort of like, well, that's exactly what we are looking for, really. It's the right scale, and it's a much more accessible price point for us.
And you have a foot on that farming ladder now.
Yeah.
Is it what you dreamed of? You're screwing up your faces.
I mean, there's been ups and downs, definitely. It's not all been plain sailing. If you're doing anything with animals, there's always going to be something that goes wrong, and we've had plenty of that, but there's also been plenty of stuff that, having tried for the first time, we've managed to do successfully.
Yeah, ups and downs is the way to describe it. There are times when everything's going wrong and you wonder why you've made these decisions, and then there's times when everything seems to be going right and it feels amazing.
And you're both still working. Luke, you have a job here, and Helena, you work mainly online. You're a scientist.
I am, and I work from home. I was doing that in York, so I was very lucky that I had a job that I could just move house, and it hasn't been a problem.
Is the aim to be self-sufficient?
That's kind of, I guess, our primary goal, is to work towards that sort of self-sufficiency as much as you realistically can. But then also what we'd quite like to do is build up the croft to be able to provide food that we grow here to be available locally, and other products as well. So we sent some sheep to the abattoir this year. We got the skins back, which are currently being tanned. But a lot of little projects that we want to sort of kick off and see what we can do.
And you're learning new skills. Yes. Fencing. Yeah. That is very impressive.
We watched a lot of YouTube videos. The fences are still standing, so I think we've done a reasonably good job.
I think it looks really good. Our neighbour thought that we were mad. It's like, why are you not getting a contractor in to do this? But that was another thing where at the time we were doing it, we were cursing and swearing and why have we done this? But once it was finished, I think we're really proud of that, and it's a skill that we've gained now. I think with a lot of things in crofting and farming, you just have to give it a go.
Yeah.
So would you recommend making the move?
I've no regrets doing it, certainly. It's been a great experience. Local crofters have been really, really helpful and really welcoming.
Our personal experience has been that they're just happy that young people are getting involved and are interested. And as long as you're open to listening to them and their experiences, then they're happy to help you.
Helena and Luke Crossland with Nancy Nicholson. And we stay with the next generation of farmers, this time in Northern Ireland. The Ulster Farmers Union has accused the Northern Ireland government of failing to support young farmers following the closure of one scheme last year and with another also about to come to an end. The Young Farmers Payment Scheme closed in 2025, though the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs says successful applicants will continue to get top-up payments for 5 years. The pilot Farming for the Generations scheme was designed to support farming families planning for succession. It's closing next month, and DAERA says there will be an evaluation before the scheme is relaunched. James McCluggage, Policy Director at the Ulster Farmers Union, told me that leaves young farmers in Northern Ireland with no support at all from March.
At the minute, at the end of this pilot, there's currently not a scheme for young farmers. What sentiment does that give to the industry that there's nothing there for younger farmers in Northern Ireland?
What does it actually mean on the ground for those young farmers? Are some of them going to decide, do you think, not to go into farming at all?
In terms of for barriers of entry for young people to go in, access to finance and finances are an issue. There's other things there of improving skill sets of young farmers, etc. But in terms of sentiment, it would be good to have some sort of financial incentive for a young person to come into the business or to take over a business. That's effectively what we're asking for as the UFU is, okay, roll over the legislation for 2026 for the young farmer payment and the regional reserve. And let's not rush it. Let's get the right thing in place so it really, really does work and we get the right benefit.
We asked the Northern Ireland government for a response. DAERA told us the evaluation of the pilot, the Farming for Generations pilot, will help inform the development of a new scheme which, subject to all necessary approvals being in place, is planned for launch before the end of 2026-2027. So there are plans to relaunch that pilot.
Yeah, and we will have say, and we've been involved in discussions and part of that. Let's roll over the Young Farmer Payment Regional Reserve for 2026 and let's get a good scheme ready for 2027, which gets meaningful benefit.
When you say meaningful benefit, how much money was involved here? How much was it helping young farmers?
Roughly last year of the 2025 scheme, I think was around £2 million for the budget went to Young Farmer Scheme. That'll be £2 million then over the 5 years. That's money actually in the hands of the young farmer to help them get started. Out of the total budget which comes into Northern Ireland of 300 million, it's not a lot of money, but it's almost the helping hand. And
if you get it right, how much could it help young farmers coming into business in Northern Ireland? And do you need, how desperate are you for young farmers to take up this industry?
The average age of farmers in Northern Ireland is around 59 years of age. We've got to get young blood into the industry. Northern Ireland Agriculture PLC is we're very proud of it. We punch well above our weight, but to be able to punch, we got to be able to keep young people into the industry.
James McCluggage from the Ulster Farmers Union. A new report published by the Resolution Foundation says the government's goal of net zero across the UK could force less profitable farms into debt and lead to 3,500 farms losing money. It says progress to decarbonise farming has been slow and there's no silver bullet which will do the heavy lifting for the sector to reduce its impact on climate change. It points out that farmers risk sharp income falls on already fragile businesses. It advises that policymakers should intervene to ensure costs are passed to the consumer and that a better land use policy should be designed, and it warns if changes are not made, then national food security will be threatened. Zachary Leather, economist at the Resolution Foundation, co-authored the report.
Lots of the major sectors of the net zero transition have been making lots of progress, but farming and land use is something that's a bit further behind, just 5% fall in emissions in the last 15 years. To make our net zero targets this decade, that's going to need to really increase in the next few years, speeding up by around 7-fold.
Your report also talks about the cost. What are you saying there about the costs to farmers?
The costs of meeting net zero in farming are actually pretty small. It's only around 2 to 3% of the cost of running a farm day to day. The problem is that farming is in a really precarious financial situation for lots of factors that are nothing to do with net zero. And that's why we find that farming incomes are really low, with, the average farm in 2024 making just £6 an hour. That's like barely half the minimum wage. So the problem is not the net zero costs are big. The problem is that farming is in a really rough financial position. So what we want to think about is not necessarily be scared about the costs, but be thinking really carefully about how to allocate them. If consumers, instead of farmers and the rest of the supply chain, including supermarkets, food distributors, if they were taking on the cost of this net zero, barely notice it. The inflation that you'd see in food prices, for example, would be comfortably less than 1% over 25 years, which is not very big when you're thinking about this very, very long transition. Farmers, on the other hand, if they were forced to bear these costs, as we fear that they would, then those income falls would be big. Net zero cost being put on farmers would cut incomes by a fifth. So it's less about the cost being big and more about who bears them.
At the moment, farmers have been given taxpayers' money to implement environmental schemes which do go towards the net zero target. Should there be more money for that to help farmers bear the cost of decarbonising?
It is the taxpayer, it is the household that eventually pays for that. And so it's not a way of avoiding consumers taking any costs of this. What we're seeing with the subsidies, like the sustainable farming incentive, a lot of the time, in order to, if you want to use subsidy to both persuade farmers to do things as well as compensate them, you end up both paying quite a lot. So, there are some actions in the sustainable farming incentive that save farmers money, but the taxpayer is paying farmers to do them. So if we want to do this in a cost-efficient way that gets costs down for the taxpayer, as well as getting costs down for the farmer and getting costs down for the consumer, then we need to be thinking more about how to use market mechanisms, which is why we recommend regulations that try and put the burden on supermarkets.
But if the cost is passed on to the consumer in the shops, wouldn't that just make British produce more expensive and less able to compete with imports?
Yeah, it's vital that any solution also deals with the fact that, farmers are, exposed to competition externally. And that's one of the reasons why we suggest going with a carbon emissions standard, which would apply also to, incoming imports as well, to ensure that they aren't simply undercut.
Your report recognises that some land use definitely has to change. Using land for solar energy, for instance, you note that there will be resistance to that. How do you suggest those land use pressures are resolved?
One thing to be very clear about is with this, this land use change is often misunderstood. Solar is likely to be an extremely small part of the land that changes use. Largely, this is for forestry, restoring peatlands. It's important that, the public understands that the land that changes use is also going to become part of our natural environment. It's about a shifting of the role of the farmer in some cases, from being one of growing food to one of being a custodian of the land. Those subsidies we were talking about earlier should be used to funding this land use change instead.
Zachary Leather from the Resolution Foundation. If you'd like to comment on anything you've heard in the programme, you can do so by email. We're farming.today@bbc.co.uk. That's all from us today. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.